President Obama going on a PR offensive to sell that Iranian nuclear deal that is starting to shape up. Telling the Times columnist Thomas Friedman, it will make the U.S. safer.
If, in fact, we can resolve these issues diplomatically, we are more likely to be safe, more likely to be secure, in a better position to protect our allies. And who knows, Iran may change. If it doesn't, our deterrence capabilities, our military superiority stays in place.
Okay, so it all begs the question, and I'll start with you, Michael, as to can he sell this? And I'll show the poll numbers on this. The public, they disagree with the Republicans in both the House and the Senate. They believe that, they like the deal by almost a 2-to-1 margin. Cut down the sanctions if that makes this more doable. Now, I'm sure if you ask the public, do you trust Iran? You're probably going to see the same split here, if not even higher, of those that distrust. But nonetheless, the public at least, and the editorial pages at least, seem to be saying it's better than status quo. Why not?
I believe this is driven purely by domestic politics in the United States, shaping up for the 2016 presidential election, and what we just saw in Israel with domestic politics there, and Netanyahu was reelected. And on this panel, Andrew is hosting. Doherty and I and Dominic said, we're going to see a change. Netanyahu, a month after he gets reelected, is going to make peace or retract his comments about Palestine and backpedal on Iran. And it took him a day. It took him one day.
We had a good panel.
We're prophetic. It's great. This is entirely domestic politics, and the Journal has already picked up on that, talking about Jewish voters in urban areas and donors who give based on Israel and Jewish causes are now drifting more towards Republicans. So it's had its desired effect, and I'm not judging that. It's smart politics. But this is just about domestic politics. And it's not even Democratic primary voters or Democratic voters, because they keep saying Hillary is going to have to take a position on this that supports the president, because voters in New Hampshire and Iowa and the Carolinas and in Ohio and Pennsylvania don't care about this issue. It's just not theirs, and they think international affairs is the purview of the president and the executive. Let's try this. What can happen?
Okay, but to that end, Andrew, whether or not the public cares or doesn't care in Iowa or New Hampshire, Congress is going to still have to vote on this one way or the other. What's the sense? Is there a downside to people who killed the deal summarily, even if this week the president's getting the scientific community to say it's not just, hey, please, Ayatollah, check it out, make sure you guys aren't doing this. There's going to be actually checks and balance attached to this, and if it doesn't, we can always go back to the way it was.
First of all, it's not like Congress has to sign off on it like it's a treaty. There are aspects to it that Congress is going to be able to sign off or otherwise impede. And there's going to be a push to even strengthen the sanctions against Iran. Republicans have been pushing for that for some time. But of course, the president won't sign that, so that's not going anywhere. You won't have an ally in Congress, but I don't know how much they're going to be able to block everything. But the selling point of it is difficult, because as much as people like the idea of making a peaceful deal with Iran, all you have to do is say, well, this is anti-Israel. And now the White House is stuck trying to figure out how to convince people that it's not. And that's the tougher sell. And I think rather than focusing on that aspect, the White House has to keep pushing the reduced nuclear stockpile, and that we really have nothing to lose. We lose nothing by this. And if you can make that a compelling argument, I think there's a fighting chance.
You also have to educate, A, where is Iran? And two, we talked about the invasion of Iraq, right? Iraq has what, 30 million people, 26 million people? Iran has 80 million people. These are completely different countries, and being able to talk about stability in that region.
But most people know two things about Iran. One is that they're anti-Israel, and two, that they took our hostages 35 years ago.
So here we are rolling into a presidential election where, again, Iranian politics is going to determine something.
Though, Jeannie, maybe I'm overreaching this. Andrew's right. Those are the only two things they know. But I know a lot of people who normally say, whatever it is, I'm going to take Israel's side. They didn't like the fact that Netanyahu basically got on the floor of Congress, disrespected the president, and told us, even though we write a check for $4+ billion a year, how we should conduct our foreign policy. They didn't like the fact that they read a story that, that he kind of misinterpreted or relayed the intelligence, hyped up stuff during the election, and then at the other end did a 180 the day after the election. I'm not so sure the American public is bigger fans of the guy on our screen right now as maybe Republicans would believe that they are. Is there more of a play for the president where it's not political suicide to criticize Israel more than he did maybe 5, 10, 15 years ago?
No, that's not going to play, because even if people don't like Netanyahu, they like Israel. And, people, as much as they may not like Netanyahu, they're not going to vote on that issue. So, you know, it is a very difficult, I think, uphill battle for the president here. And you know what? Speaking of Hillary Clinton, she not only has to take a position on this, she started this ball rolling. So she already has a position on this.
Well, she
so
made it clear she supports negotiating with Iran. Yeah.
And she got this ball rolling initially when she was Secretary of State. So she has a position, even though she's come out since and had this kind of, you know, more wishy-washy position. This is a very difficult selling point for the president. And as much as we look at polls saying 59% of Americans support a deal, when it comes down to it, you can look at polls on any issue. The drip, drip, drip of criticism that's going to come will slowly push those poll numbers down. We saw it with healthcare. We see it with gun control. You look at those numbers, and the attacks will come, and those numbers will fall.
To my point, Dominic, and maybe I'm giving way too much credit here, but because of everything that Jeannie just said and the fights we've had in the past, I gotta believe that the White House both had conversations with McConnell and Netanyahu behind closed doors and said, this is where this thing's going. This is how we're going to play this all. I'll give back on certain things in the next weeks here, so you get to have your, that you won on certain things, Republican Senate, and also Netanyahu, you're going to come back to me on certain things. I got to think they're not all swinging wildly in three different directions on this. Am I giving them too much credit?
Yes, because Netanyahu, his concerns are not Obama's concerns. And Netanyahu, frankly, knows that he boxed Obama in when he came and went before his Congress, and it looked like a State of the Union address, but it wasn't Obama. And Netanyahu also knows, I mean, this is like kind of lurking in the background. This president is a little different, the first black president. And so he's concerned, he mentioned the interview that you showed at the top of the segment. Mr. Obama is concerned about the perception in Israel that the relationship may not be as strong between him and the Israeli people. And he has a right to be concerned.
You really think Michael, he cares that much? I think he's had it up to here with Netanyahu. Yeah.
As he said in his last State of the Union, he said, well, I've won 2 elections. I don't have to run for re-election. That's point one. So he doesn't have to go back before the American people. Point two, to your question, it's not scripted, but everybody knows their lines. So there is no formal script, but everybody knows how they should behave in this situation, and then they just do it. But chances are there was no conversation between the president and McConnell
Legacy.
saying, I think
Legacy
McConnell
from
just...
Mr. Obama, that's what he's concerned about.
Every president thinks they can make peace in the Middle East, and nobody has.
We talked about Cuba, though. That kind of, all right. When we come back here, we're going to bring things much closer to home. We'll talk local politics, including some big names talking about Hillary Clinton. Robert De Niro, Gary Hart here, and how about calling Brooklyn home? We got a lot of stuff about Hillary and more after this.